Hello, welcome to Australia. Now, you might find the title of this particular video strange, so I'd like to take a minute to explain why I think Trump is actually, in a very strange way, a gift to America. Now, if you think right back to the beginning of the Trump presidency, had he been impeached 2 weeks in or something for his blatant contravening of the Emoluments Act that most of us hadn't heard of prior to him getting the presidency, you know, that was things like renting one of his buildings to the Pentagon and all the other ways he makes money via Mar-a-Lago by it being his retreat and so forth. If he had been impeached from the beginning, we would have been left with Pence. And I think Mike Pence is beyond social conservatism. He is really a 1950s guy. It would have been really ugly for the Dreamers. All the fiscal stuff would have been horrendous. And he would have looked more moderate. He would have looked more normal and acceptable. And the Republican Party could have hidden behind this respectability. But because of the blatant and cartoon nature of Trump and his administration, it's left the Republicans nowhere to hide. It is gobsmacking to me how they get away with their craven behaviour, now turning on the institutions of America that they were always supporting. So they are cowardly, hypocritical, bigoted people who would have looked more reasonable than they are. And one of the consequences of the Trump presidency has been to energise America and energise millennials and energise anyone with a heart and a brain to really think about politics and to really engage with politics. Some for the first time, some after a long break or whatever. So in that sense, I think it's been healthy, and if he hadn't been as dramatically awful as he is, that might not have occurred, and people would have just sort of gone, oh well, the Republicans are in, we hope something happens down the track. That's just my feel. So it's one way of dealing with the mayhem of this administration, is to realise it actually has had that energising effect. So speaking of the hypocrisy of Republicans, today I went for coffee, I was reading the news, and I was staggered to see this particular item. Now, along with everything else that happens on a daily basis, huge stories get buried because the next drama and the next scandal sort of overtakes it by lunchtime. But in case you missed it, the co-chairman of Trump's campaign, there was Paul Manafort and Tim Nicol, is that his name? Tim Nicol, I think. Tim Nolan, sorry, N-O-L-A-N. A judge, a Republican judge. He was sentenced today for sexual trafficking of minors. These are on charges that go back over 50 years, right up until 2004. And he was sentenced to 20 years jail today. That was Trump's campaign co-chairman. Really, it's staggering. So, on we go with this particular reading, which is, let me frame the question. How the Trump presidency will inform America. So it is shaping things in a new direction. So maybe shape's the right word. Okay, how will Trump's presidency shape America? Trump's presidency, shape America. All right, the card that fell out, the manipulator. So I think we're on the right track. What I'm going to do is a 10-card reading before Trump, during Trump, and after Trump. Let's see what turns out here. Okay. All right. So starting with the Two of Pentacles, the juggler, the manipulator. In this context, this represents Trump, and it represents him very well. Before Trump, in this particular column, we have the Four of Cups. This is America, if you like, rethinking its values as it goes along. Life just goes along and things change. If you think of before Bernie Sanders, no one in America was speaking of a universal health system or a one-payer system. So things were just moving in this kind of predictable way. It was business as usual, with occasional people popping up who had something to say, either positive or negative, and trying to influence values. But essentially, it was a bit of a status quo. You also had the underlying conflicts that were always there. Trump has brought out the worst of America in the sense of, particularly in relation to race issues and misogyny towards women. Now, he didn't invent these. They're not because of Trump. He simply highlighted them. So we're talking before Trump. These issues were going on. They were very much there. We had the King of Wands, and to me, this represents Obama. Given that he had 2 terms, he's a very significant player in how America saw itself, and people loved him or hated him. But he was nonetheless, in the very positive sense of King of Wands, a very strong-willed individual who ultimately was compassionate and who had a high intellect and had the good of the people at heart. Now, I'm not an unconditional Obama supporter, and I certainly don't think Obamacare as it ended up was anything resembling a just healthcare system, but that's because Obama lost a lot of concessions to the Republicans, and so it got watered down and so forth. But nonetheless, there was a person of integrity who was respected by the rest of the world. So those are the sort of 3 dominant themes in the US prior to Trump. Then along came the Nine of Cups. This figure, very much a commercial figure, remembering both open and closed. So the arms are closed. That's Trump who doesn't want to listen, Trump who can't be told anything. And open, the knees are open. That's the Trump who, in fact, the last person in his ear gets to say what the story of the day will be. He's open to the real fake news, if you like. This is a very shallow person who is only motivated by his own comfort. Right. Back to the emotions. So Trump is a contradiction in many ways, and one is that on the one hand he has very little emotional sensibility. I'm sure if you were married to him or were one of his kids or something, he's very cold. On the other hand, he's a gusher because he's a con man. Con men are very good at being charming and gushing. So this figure encapsulates or embodies those qualities of Trump. This with the Ten of Wands, I have called it the martyr card before, but it has other interpretations. And although I'm sure Trump in his own tiny world thinks he's hard done by, I don't think it has that representation of martyrdom so much as hard work by others to try and make this thing work. So the White Walkers in the White House are working very hard, even though many of them have very limited capacity and very selfish motives, are trying to keep the train on the tracks. Right? So to work for him is hard work. To even be a citizen in the country at the moment is hard work. And that's the feeling I get through your comments generally. It's so exhausting. Being part of either supporting Trump is exhausting because it's embarrassing and there's always a new fire to put out every 2.5 hours. And if you are worried about him or actually actively hate him, it's also exhausting. He is hard work. Just like 2-year-olds are hard work, generally. The Queen of Cups. Okay, this is the current column. Who is the Queen of Cups? I don't think it's Melania because she's spectacularly uncommitted to her role as First Lady. She's progressively out of the picture for obvious reasons. Now his behaviour has been exposed. I'm sure she knew about it all, but now it's really embarrassing. So I don't think it is Melania. I think it's either Ivanka or her mother, Ivana. Remember I said in an earlier reading, we're going to hear more about Ivana. At this point, I'm leaning a bit more towards the mother, but I think it's one or other of those women. So cups are emotion. It's someone who has a great emotional role in Trump's life, and then by flow-on effect, is affecting America. So it might not be press releases by Ivanka or Ivana, it's their influence on him is affecting all of you guys. Now, into the future, you have the Star card reversed. The Star, which is hope and bountifulness and harmony and all the good things, reversed. So there is no doubt in the aftermath of Trump, that's post-heart attack, post-resignation, which I personally think is the most likely scenario, or post-anything, America is still going to be really rattled by this presidency. If he was gone tomorrow afternoon, it would still have this impact. But what is more important with this is where it goes from here. So America, after Trump, there is this card in terms of the Six of Pentacles, the various interpretations of this. This is a slightly condescending figure to the beggars, so to speak. So what this would mean in sort of a quick interpretation, you still have the powerful being sort of patronizing to those who are less well off than themselves. But there is a quintessential difference, and that difference is this is a card that has been variously described as the quid pro quo card. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So in the context of my interpretation there, it would be, if you vote for me, I'll at least do something for you. The scales are there, as opposed to Trump, who'll do nothing for anybody except his very wealthy oligarch mates. So there is that. So there is that feel of reciprocity that has been missing. So Republicans aren't going to magically become warm and fuzzy, but they might become more reasonable in this. And I think as a nation, after the initial sort of rocking that Trump has created, it will resume a more democratic semblance of acknowledging that not everyone is equal, because that's the missing link at the moment. The Page of Swords. This is youthful energy. Now at times it is more youthful patriarchal energy, you know, young men flying off the handle, but in the more generic sense, when we're talking about a whole nation, I think this is going back to where it all began with the American narrative of hard work, initiative, and therefore you'll get your rewards. So the intellect has been awakened. It's not going to be altogether a magically inspired run, in the sense that the sword leaves the boundary of the cards. It's incomplete in that sense. But I think it represents a return to that, let's do things differently, let's make it better. There is an optimism and an energy to the Page of Swords. So I'm just going to pull out another couple now. And what's turned up is the Six of Wands, the new leader, dun, da, da, the new leader, and the King of Swords. Now, like Rosie in Tarot Politics, I associate this card most often with Muller. But even post-Muller, there is a feeling of justice being restored. And restored for a reason. Restored for the higher good. So I see that as quite positive as an outcome. So, leaving that reading there, I'm going to push on now and give you some more, because my last reading took 2.5 days to upload. Don't go there, I'm a technological dinosaur. Now, speaking of being a technological dinosaur, I am actually getting help to make things happen in terms of my PayPal account. So for those of you who want private readings, and already there are some, in the next week or so, I will be getting back to you, and finally we'll be in business in terms of being able to do those readings for you. Okay, so ta-ta from now till I see you next time. Bye.